It took me 70 years to build a castle, only to realize I was its prisoner, not its king. My name is Arthur. I am 78 years old. If you have spent your life past 60, accumulating things just to feel secure, you are making the mistake that will ruin your final freedom. Listen closely, because old age does not forgive those who carry too much weight. For decades, I thought I was winning. I owned a machining and tool plant in the heart of the Rust Belt. I worked 12-hour days until my joints burned, just to afford a 5,000 square foot estate in the most expensive zip code in the county. It took me 30 years to pay off those walls. I filled them with heavy mahogany furniture and a collection of vintage watches worth more than most people earn in a decade. I thought that was the goal. I thought the bigger the house, the more I would be respected when my hair turned white. I thought my things were my protection. I believed the lie that wealth was a shield against the silence of getting older. I lived in a state of expensive clutter and empty rooms that gathered nothing but dust and property taxes. My identity was wrapped in the square footage of my home. I was a king in a hollow empire. The illusion shattered on my 75th birthday. I was alone in my library. My wife had been gone for 6 years, and the house was quiet. Too quiet. A sudden pressure clamped down on my heart like a heavy iron vice. I felt the strength drain from my legs. I collapsed onto the cold hardwood floor. As I lay there gasping for air, I realized my smartphone was on the desk just a few feet away, but it might as well have been on the moon. I could not reach it. I lay there staring up at a baccarat crystal vase on a pedestal. That piece of glass cost as much as a new SUV. It sat there shining in the dim light. It was perfect, and it was worthless. It could not hold my hand. It could not call for help. It could not tell me it loved me. I was dying in a tomb I built for myself, surrounded by expensive junk that did not give a damn about my soul. I realized in that moment that I had spent my life guarding stuff instead of cultivating presence. I survived that day, but the mansion became a graveyard to me. I realized that the things I thought I owned actually owned me. Now I have to tell you the truth before your own walls become your cage. The library smelled of stale cigar smoke and expensive furniture wax. It was my fortress. On my 75th birthday, I sat in a leather chair that cost more than my first home. I was surrounded by $100,000 worth of vintage watches, all ticking in a perfect, mocking unison. Then my own heart decided to quit. The pain was a whisper at first, a dull pressure like a heavy hand on my ribs. Then the hand became a fist, and it twisted. I tried to reach for the desk, but my legs turned to water. I hit the hardwood floor, and the cold oak felt like a slab of ice against my face. I could see my smartphone on the mahogany desk just 3 feet away, but I could not move a finger. I looked up and saw a baccarat crystal vase sitting on its marble pedestal. It was perfect, translucent. It cost as much as a new luxury SUV. I stared at it while I gasped for air and realized that piece of glass did not give a damn if I lived or died. It would not call for help. It would not hold my hand. It was just a hollow object in a hollow house. My son Rick is 50 years old, and he had called earlier that day, but he did not ask how I was feeling. He wanted to know if the trust fund was liquid enough to back his latest business failure. He was already dividing the spoils while I was still gasping for breath. I lay there for hours in the silence of my own success, realizing I was a dying man in a museum of my own making. I survived that night only because a neighbor noticed the mail piling up. But the Arthur who loved his things died on that floor. I looked at my 20 empty rooms and saw nothing but a graveyard for my time. I decided to shed the weight before it buried me for good, but I was about to find out that the world has a very cruel way of telling you that your life work is worth nothing. I went back to that house after the hospital, feeling like a ghost in my own hallways. My chest was tender, and every breath felt earned, but I was still the same stubborn man who had built a factory from nothing. I told myself I just needed to adjust the system. I did not need to leave. I just needed to work harder at staying. I spent $2,000 a month on landscapers just to keep the hedges sharp and the lawn emerald green, because I believed that if the estate looked powerful, then I was still powerful. I was wrong. I was just paying for a beautiful shroud. I decided to host a grand Sunday dinner to prove I was back. I spent hours polishing the heavy silver and dragging the mahogany chairs into place until my joints screamed. I sat at the head of that massive table that seats 12 and waited for the house to feel full again. My son Rick arrived late, with his eyes fixed on the vintage Rolex on my wrist instead of the paleness of my face. He did not ask how my heart was beating. He asked for a $60,000 bridge loan for another one of his failed business ideas. I sat there in the silence of that drafty dining room, realizing I was nothing more than an automated teller machine with a pulse. I was trying to buy his time with the very wealth that had stolen mine. I clung to that unused lake house in Michigan like it was a holy relic, even as the roof rotted and the taxes climbed. I told myself it was for the grandkids, but the grandkids did not want a drafty cabin 3 hours away. They wanted a grandfather who was not exhausted from managing a portfolio of burdens. I was a slave to the image of the successful Arthur Sterling. I kept the German luxury car in the driveway, even though I was too terrified of a dizzy spell to drive it past the mailbox. I was guarding a museum of a life that was already over. I was a man drowning in property taxes and maintenance fees for 20 empty rooms that gathered nothing but dust and the echoes of my own regrets. I thought my legacy was the weight of my assets, but I was just a caretaker for a pile of expensive junk that was destined for a dumpster the moment my heart finally gave out for good. I thought I could control the ending by holding on to the things I loved, but I was about to learn that the things I owned were the very things that were going to bury me alive. The silence in that 5,000-square-foot tomb was finally louder than my own heartbeat. I sat in the library, watching the dust motes dance in the light of a window I would soon have to pay someone to clean again. I realized I was not a king. I was a high-priced janitor for a life that had already left the building. My son Rick had stopped calling to ask about my health and started calling to ask about the deed to the lake house. I was worth more to him as a ledger of assets than as a father. That realization hit me harder than the cold floor of my library. I looked at the heavy mahogany desk and the rows of leather-bound books, and I felt a sudden visceral disgust. These were not treasures, they were anchors. I was 78 years old, and I was still worried about property taxes on rooms I had not stepped into for 3 years. I picked up the phone with hands that were finally steady because the fear was gone and only the truth remained. I called a woman named Helen who sold estates like mine. When she arrived, she walked through my 20 rooms with a clipboard and a look of cold, professional reality. I showed her the silver and the antiques and the crystal. I waited for her to tell me I was a wealthy man. Instead, she looked at me and said, "Arthur, this is just a house full of heavy things that nobody under the age of 50 wants to buy. Your furniture is just firewood to the next generation. You are spending your life guarding a warehouse of yesterday." That was my rock bottom. I was a man trading his final breaths for the sake of keeping a museum open for an audience of one. I felt a strange and terrifying lightness start to take hold of me. I told her to sell it all. Every brick, every chair, every watch. I was going to strip my life down to the bone to see if there was any soul left underneath the clutter. But the moment I put that sign in the yard, I realized that my things were not the only things that were going to fight to keep me prisoner. I stood there, watching that for sale sign go into the grass, and for the first time in 30 years, I could breathe. You are probably sitting in a house right now that is too big for your soul. You think those extra bedrooms are for the grandkids, but they only visit twice a year and spend the whole time on their phones. Sell that empty estate. Those rooms are just warehouses for ghosts and money pits for property taxes. Your identity is not in the height of your ceilings. It is in your ability to move and live. Trade that luxury car for something reliable, or just call a driver. At 78, I can tell you that the feeling of being debt-free is 1,000 times sweeter than the ego of being seen in a Mercedes. Your neighbors do not care about your car, and they certainly will not be there to help you when your health fails. Look at that coin collection, or those antiques you have been guarding like a dragon. You think they are a fortune, but to your children, they are just a chore. They will throw your life work into a dumpster, or sell it for $5 at a garage sale the week after you are gone. Sell it now. Take that money and go see the world while you can still walk without a cane. Do not leave them a museum of junk. Leave them the memory of a person who was actually happy. And that vacation house you are holding on to out of sentiment is just an expensive hotel for your anxiety. If you are not there every single month, it is just another anchor pulling you down. Let it go. Stop eating your lonely meals at a mahogany table that seats 12. It is a heavy relic of a past that is not coming back. Surround yourself with light and space where you can move without fearing you will break a family heirloom. You are not a museum curator. You are a human being in the winter of your life. And for heaven's sake, stop being the family bank. Stop trying to save your adult children or your relatives with your retirement nest egg. A loan to family is just a gift you cannot afford. Do not compromise your own health care or your peace of mind to subsidize their bad management. You have done your job. Now it is time to save yourself. Finally, stop obsessing over the legacy of a massive inheritance. The best legacy you can leave is not being a burden. Die with your bank account as close to zero as possible, because you actually had the courage to live every cent of it. I sold my castle so I could walk in the park without a single worry. The weight is off my shoulders, and for the first time in my life, my time belongs to me. Look around you right now. What do you own, and what owns you? I sold my castle so I could finally be free. Don't wait for a heart scare to realize that freedom is lighter than gold. Start selling your excess today. You will thank me when the weight is off your shoulders and your life finally belongs to you. Look around your room right now. Really look at the shadows in the corners and the heavy things you have spent a lifetime guarding. Ask yourself if you are living in a home or if you have become the night watchman for a warehouse of your own history. Every one of those objects represents an hour of your life you traded away, and you will never get those hours back. I spent 30 years paying for a mansion that felt like a cathedral when I was young, but turned into a tomb when the silence moved in. I lost years of sunsets with my wife because I was at the factory earning money for a lake house we only visited when we were too tired to enjoy it. We were so busy building a legacy of brick and mortar that we forgot to build a legacy of moments. Do not let your life be a pile of maintenance receipts. Your children do not want your heavy furniture or your boxes of heirlooms. They want a parent who is not a slave to a zip code. They want the version of you that is light and present, and not distracted by the next repair bill or the property tax deadline. When you hold on to these anchors, you are not leaving them a gift. You are leaving them a burden. They will have to sort through the moment you are gone. The world is still turning outside your window, and it is getting smaller every single day. Your heart is a drum that only has a certain number of beats left in it. Stop wasting those precious beats on dusting trophies and guarding empty rooms. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for a doctor to tell you that you have 6 months left before you decide to be happy? Are you waiting for another heart scare to prove that your expensive watches cannot tell you how much time you have left? The only thing you truly own is the air in your chest and the peace in your mind. Everything else is just clutter. Strip away the status. Peel back the layers of vanity and junk that have buried the real you for half a century. Sell the estate. Give away the silver. Tell your family that the bank is closed because the Father is finally open. I am 78 years old, and I am finally a king because I have nothing left to lose. I have a small chair, a few books, and a view of a park where I can walk without a single worry on my back. My time finally belongs to me. Does yours? Or do you still belong to the ghosts in your basement? Go to the mirror right now. Look at the person looking back at you and ask them if they are ready to stop being a janitor for their own past. Start shedding the weight today, not tomorrow. Not next week, today, because the only thing heavier than a 5,000 square foot house is the weight of the regret you will feel when you realize you ran out of time while you were busy polishing your chains.